How many of you guys are super excited to go through the names of God? I'm excited about it too. We talked about it in our pastoral internship. And can you hold this, please? And like he said, he was like, well, both of you guys are going to, me and Jimmy, he's like, both of you guys are going to pick a name. And I was like, I know a name I want so bad. And what's really funny is that it's a name that I didn't knew existed until like a month ago. But it totally encompasses how I feel. Anyway, but before we get into what the name is, I want to talk about a story from the Bible that most of you guys, or if not all of you guys, have heard, and that's Abraham and Sarah. You guys know that story? Okay. So instead of focusing, though, with that whole story about, Abraham's promise and all of this stuff, we're going to focus on a different aspect. So today we're going to be talking about Hagar. And Hagar was the maid or the slave that Abraham had Ishmael with. So basically, I'm going to go through this for you guys. So Hagar, I want you guys to keep this in the back of your head. Hagar means forsaken or one that fears. That's the name that someone gave her. That's really sad in my opinion, but that's what her name means. And so you have these two people, right? You have Abraham and you have Sarah, and God tells Abraham to go outside and look at the stars, and that's how many generations he's going to have. Well, Abraham was super old at this time, but not only that, his wife Sarah was really old at this time. And so in their mind, they couldn't understand why God was going to give them children. But he said, I'm going to give you a son, he's going to be the promise, all this stuff. Well, Abraham believed God, and he was like, all right, that sounds good. But years went by before Sarah conceived anyone. And she came to Abraham, and she was like, you know what? This is not going to happen. I'm way too old. There's no way that I can have a kid. But my maid can. And so she propositions Abraham to be like, why don't you go and be with my maid, and then that's how you can get it. She jumped ahead of God. And Abraham was like, yeah, sounds like a good idea. Why wouldn't he, to have the chance to be with a younger woman, right? He was like, that sounds right, even though that's not at all what God told them to do. But he's like, yep, that sounds good. So he goes, and he's with Hagar, and she gets pregnant with a boy. I want to take a deep look into this because Hagar was just a young woman. We don't even know how old she was. We don't even know if she was a believer. She was a slave, right? We're assuming she's Egyptian. And she was a maid. She had no choice in anything that happened to her. And when you go and you read the Bible, they don't even call her by name. They always say, my slave, my maid, your maid. They never say her name. So Hagar gets pregnant, and she's devastated. And after that, Sarah, like any woman would, gets jealous. And Sarah starts to treat Hagar with discontent. She starts to treat Hagar really poorly, and she's like just super mean to her. So Hagar flees. She runs away. And it says in Genesis 16:7 that she is found in the wilderness. It says, now the angel of the Lord found her by a spring or water in the wilderness. I want to focus on the word wilderness because this is used several times in the Bible. And basically, it could literally mean the wilderness, like a forest. Or it's an emotional point, a spiritual spot that you're at. A lot of times we are in wildernesses ourselves. We have our own wilderness. And it basically can just mean the depths of despair. Like it is the lowest of lows that you have ever felt. It is where you feel lonely and depressed and abandoned, and you're just all alone and you don't know what to do. And when the Bible talks about the wilderness, it even talks about Jesus being in the wilderness, and that's where he gets tempted by the devil and all of these different things. And so I want to focus on the fact that she's in the wilderness, which probably literally means wilderness because she's by a spring, but it's also in reference to her spiritual and emotional state at the time. She's this young girl. She was forced to be with this older man. She got pregnant, and then the person who forced her to be with that man treats her horribly. I mean, just try to put yourself into that. It's devastating, and so she runs away. But the angel comes up to her, and he says, "Where are you going?" He says, "Hagar, where are you going?" And there's two important things to know about this, is that, one, he uses her name. And it's the first time that somebody called her by name. In the Bible, it says Sarah's maid Hagar. But whenever Sarah and Abraham are talking to each other about her, they say maid or slave. They never say her name. So this is really important to know, that God came to her, and the first thing he did was call her by name, which basically means, I know you. The next thing he did is said, "What are you doing? Where are you going?" And this is super important, because these are the questions that imply that she had a choice of what she was doing and where she was going. He didn't come to her and say, "Hey, knock it off. Like, stop right now, freeze." He said, "Where are you going?" Very, very calm, very easy. And that implies that she has a choice, that he's asking her, what's the choice you're making right now? Which means she has the free will to do what she wanted to do. Basically, the angel talks to her and says, "I need you to go back." He doesn't say, "Go back." He says, "I need you to go back." Again, implying that she has a choice and she has free will. Because with God, she does. And he said, "You're going to go back. I need you to go back. You're going to have this son. And from this son, I will give him generations upon generations." Now, he's not the promise that Isaac is, but Ishmael has his own lineage and all of these own things. And Hagar's response, and this is the first time that we see a response in calling God a name from the experience they had. And she says, "Adonai El Roi," which is the God who sees me. I get chills. Yeah. So cool. This is super important. This name takes root into me personally for so many reasons. But if you look at the first word, Adonai means God. So a lot of the names that we go through, they're either going to say Jehovah or they're going to say Adonai. Jehovah means the Lord. Adonai means God. El Roi means who sees me. Everybody say, he sees me. This is the coolest, Zach didn't say it, Zachary. This is the coolest, in my personal opinion, the coolest name for God, because this puts it on a personal level. My mom did an amazing job last week talking about Jehovah Jireh, but even that is talking about a provider, somebody who's bigger in creation that can help us and give us the things that we want. But when you talk about somebody who sees you, that brings them down to your level, and that you look each other in the eye. We as people, when we see somebody, we have to look them in the eye. And a couple weeks ago, I think it was like a month ago, we were going through this questionnaire thing for our internship, and we had to describe Jesus in one word. And I remember sitting there, and I'm like, I don't know how to explain it. Like, I can't put it into one word. And my dad was like, well, just tell me how you feel. And I was like, I feel like he sees me. So I feel seen. And then it wasn't until a couple weeks later that we were talking, and we went and saw The Chosen, and they talked about Adonai El Roi, and then he said, the God who sees me. And I was like, oh, that's it. That's how I feel. That's the word. And knowing that word, I tell the girls in our small group, when you know a certain word for God, when you speak that out, you're calling out that characteristic in him for you. And this is super important for us to remember, because there's always a time, no matter who you are, what you've been through, if you are single, if you're married with a family, if you're younger, if you're older, if you love your job, if you hate your job, whatever, there has always been a point in our life where we have felt completely and totally alone. And if you say that's not true, you're lying. for me in my life, I have had these little moments where I've felt like that. And I try to, tell myself all of the things in the Bible that talk about, he sees me. In Matthew, it says, he knows the numbers of hair on your head, that he's knit you together in your mother's womb. There's a verse that says he's carved your name on his palm. And if you just think of that alone, carving is to cut out. You can't get rid of that. But for me, there was a specific time in my life where I felt alone. And I have little moments now and then, like we all do. But I felt like I was not only overlooked, I felt like I was misunderstood. Sometimes I feel like God kind of pushes me to the side, like, oh, Jordan's good, she's obedient, she's fine, I don't need to worry about her, I'm going to go focus on this person. And for the most part, I'm like, you're right, I'm good, it's fine. Desi's laughing because he knows it's not true. But at this moment in time, I had found out that one of my best friends was having a baby. And even though I was super, super excited for her, I was devastated for me. This particular friend is an amazing person, but she didn't really live her life for the Lord. And I got so mad. Now, in the grand scheme of culture, I'm not that old the way my society is going, my culture, to have kids. But in my family, I'm the only single woman. In my family, every girl got married before they were 21. I'm 29. And so for me, I feel like I'm so far behind that I can't catch up. I'm so far behind that it's over and done with. I don't have any more time. I feel like Sarah. There's no way. I know. And in society, I'm around the same age as all the girls in my culture, in my generation. We're all waiting till later. The generation before us, you guys had kids at 20, 21, 22. We all went to school, and then we're having kids. And what's funny is that even the women in my family were all very opposite. I went to school, they had kids. Now I'm waiting for kids, and they're all going back to school. They're just doing it with children. And part of me is like, dummy. No offense. I'm like, you just made it so much harder, right? But I felt very, very much alone. And even though I didn't tell my friend this, even though I wasn't, venting to her, I was super excited for her, and I'm so happy for you, and this is going to be amazing, and all of this stuff. When I hung up the phone, I just started bawling because I was like, why? I'm doing everything that you told me to do. Like Hagar, she's doing everything they told her to do, and she's the one who gets tossed aside. And God kind of explained something really cool, and this is one of the very few times in my life where I know that I heard God. So, I want you guys to take a look at the picture that's going to be coming up. James, can you throw that picture up for me? I added this in last minute, so it's not on my notes. Sorry, Jessica. There's no picture on there? All right, well, maybe I didn't. It's okay. So I want you guys to think about the Milky Way. Not the candy. The Milky Way galaxy. The Milky Way galaxy has stars upon stars upon stars upon planets upon planets. It has so many that we cannot count them. It's so huge and so vast, and it says, there are the math that I was trying to figure out about how far away a certain star was. It was like 25 billion light years away or something like that, and I'm like, I don't even know what a billion light years is. It's so vast, and it's something that we can see in the sky all the time. But not only that, then we're just one galaxy. And there's galaxies upon galaxies, so many, and there's too many to count. And every day they find another one. And all of those stars have galaxies have billions and billions and billions of stars. And I personally was always obsessed with stars growing up. I got telescopes for my birthday. I had a star named after me when I turned 16. I had this book that told me all the constellations depending on the time of year. And so me and my mom and dad would go outside and I'd be like looking at the sky and being like, oh, that's that constellation or that's that one. Or one time there was this big meteor shower coming in and it was freezing. So my dad took the generator with the heater and put it outside on the concrete while me and my mom were laying with blankets just so I could watch the meteor shower. I mean, I love the stars. You will always find me looking at them. And in the Bible, it tells us that God placed all the stars in the sky and that he knows them by name. And it's crazy to me to think of all the stars that are out there, so many that we can't even count. He knows every single one by name. And they're just a ball of fire. He spoke that into existence. But with you, he breathed you into existence. You have his creative design. You have a spirit. You have a soul. You have connection. Those are just a ball of fire that burn out. But with you, he knit you together. He can count the hairs on your head. Have you guys ever tried to do that? I did when I was little. When I heard this verse at one point, I was like, I'm going to count the hairs on my head. It's like trying to count the stars. And so for me, looking up at the stars was always something that gave me peace. And when I found out that my friend was having a baby, I was so upset. And I went outside and I was looking at the stars and I was kind of yelling at God. Like, why have you just overlooked me? Like, I'm doing everything you're asking me to do. I'm trying my best, and yeah, I have mistakes, and I like step up and miss some marks on it, but I'm doing everything that I know to do, and I'm trying to follow you, and I have done things I didn't want to do because you've asked them, and I just don't understand. And it was a heart cry to God, but it was also I'm really mad at you right now. And that's okay. If you guys are mad at God, that's okay. He's a big boy. He can handle it. But then God started to speak to me, and he told me to look up at the stars. And he said, I created all of this. And if you were the only person in all of creation that ever looked up, I still would have created all of this. It would have been worth it. And so now I remember that and I look up at the stars and I think, if I'm the only person who ever noticed, he cares enough about me and the fact that I like the stars to create them. If I was the only one in all of creation that ever liked stars, he would have done that. Because he cares about me. And oftentimes we want to feel seen like that. And so we look for other things to make us feel that way. We look for other people to see us. There's a verse in the Bible, it's one of my favorite verses, and it says, the deep cries out to deep. And basically means your spirit cries out to God's spirit and vice versa. And we try to take that and apply it to personal relationships, and it doesn't work. Which is why a lot of the times we're going through these relationships, whether it's be with family or with a significant other or with friends, and we're trying to get them to fulfill the need to be seen in us. But they weren't created to do that. Only God can do that. And I think a lot of times if we just allow God to open up our eyes and show us just how amazing the stars are, he's going to see you. He sees you in everything. Uh-oh. He sees you when you are so alone and so desperate and so broken. He cries with you. He sees you when you are so excited and so happy and full of joy, and he laughs with you. He also sees us when we might not want him to see us. And he still loves you. That's the coolest part, is that he sees everything. Nobody sees everything. Even your spouse, you can still hide stuff from your spouse. It's hard, but you can. But God sees all of it. He sees everything that you're feeling, that you're thinking, everything that you have done, and everything that you will do, who you were then and who you can be with him now. He sees all of it. And he still breathed his breath into you. And he calls you by name. This is the coolest part about God, is that Hagar's name meant forsaken. In Deuteronomy 31:6, it says, "Do not fear, for I will never leave you nor forsake you." It says it again in Isaiah. "I will never leave you nor forsake you." And the coolest thing about it is that because God chose us, each and every single one of us, and he sees into the deep of your soul, your spirit, his deep cries out to deep. Somebody once told me that love was the recognition of one soul in another. And if you just think about that, I mean, his soul is recognizing yours. It leaps when it sees yours. And the coolest part about it is that because God's name is Adonai El Roi, which means the God who sees me, his name overpowered Hagar's. Hers was to be forsaken, which means to be left, to be abandoned. And his name meant, I see you. And it completely changed the course of her life. It changed her name. There are so many songs out there that talk about, I'm a child of God, or, all of these different things. There's one of my favorite songs talks that it literally says, I have a name change, right? Because now we're called saints. And it changes our name. It changes the thing that people identify us as. But only God can do that. Yeah, when you get married, your name changes. But if you take like my family, for instance, my mom's side of the family has been here for generations. When I walk around Prescott, I'm still called a Riley, even though my name's Cook. But I want to walk around and be known as a believer. And so for me, when I get into these aspects and these deep darkness parts of my life, I have to remember that God sees me. Everybody say he sees me. When you guys are going through and you're talking to Adonai El Roi, when you're calling out that characteristic in him, I want you guys to remember he sees me, but I want you to change the emphasis. It's not he sees me. It's he sees me. Over everybody, he sees me. I am his favorite. In Fireside, we have this joke about that. All of us will be like, oh, I'm his favorite. And the other one's like, well, I'm a child of God. They're like, well, I'm chosen. And we compete with each other on how much God loves us. So I want you guys to go through this week, and I want you guys to just speak out in faith, he sees me. Because this isn't something that just applies to younger generations. It doesn't matter how much life experience you have or how deep in your walk you are with the Holy Spirit, you still need to be seen. So everybody says, he sees me. Say it again, he sees me.